Awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 6th SMAC webinar. Very happy to have all of you joining. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We have the infamous Rick Bauer kicking off our SMAC webinar with peeling back the Content Hub onion for admins.
So yeah, I wanted to basically talk about some Content Hub tips and tricks, as it says on the slide. I really wanted to basically dig a little deeper. If you've seen demos of all things Content Hub, the DAM, CMP, etc. I was originally going to focus a little bit, or just mainly on the DAM. We might have a little extra time, and I can touch on some of the other modules, but in this case, I was going to focus largely on the DAM, and instead of like really the demo piece that a lot of people see, I wanted to dig a little deeper and basically kind of go beyond just like the overview and look at kind of some of the configuration, kind of still the basics of configuration, but I still think it's important to understand, or I realize that the audience could vary in their understanding of Content Hub. This is me. My name is Rick Bauer. I work for Proficient. I am a strategy MVP, and I'm also Content Hub badged right now, working towards the official, now that they've added an official certification, which is available. I'm going to go for that as well. But have been working on several Content Hub projects, and for those of you that don't like peeling back onions, we'll also work in layers and look at parfaits. So, shout out to Shrek. So I'm going to not do all deck. I'm going to be brave and go into the demo environment. It is SaaS, so and hopefully we will have everything working like it should. But if we experience any slowdowns, we'll try to avoid those. But I want to start with kind of taking and building metadata, just doing a simple pass at what it looks like just to build out a basic taxonomy, and from that to then be able to further kind of talk about methods and approaches to doing that. So actually, I'll just go from here and we'll zip over to Content Hub. But let's just kind of take a look at building some taxonomy. And first of all, I want to touch on the why, and that is really that Content Hub is metadata driven. It's not a folder structure. If you're experienced with other, or you're used to using other asset management tools, this is not folder structure. It's search based. So everything that you're going to put in here, from a search bar tool to using sort of the filtering on the side, everything like that is all driven by the taxonomy that we're putting into place to be able to surface up assets and surface them up quickly. So first of all, let's kind of just dig into creating the actual taxonomy. And as an admin, you have access to the Manage tab, and there's really a couple steps. There's typically 3 steps if you're building from the base up, and that is building a taxonomy, setting up the schema, and then applying it to the page. Because I'm going to be working in a schema that already exists, I won't need to apply it to the page, because basically that placeholder, if you will, is on the page already. But let's just start. I'm going to go in and click on taxonomy, and I'm going to create a new one. And the first thing I want to do is I'm just going to put my initials, and I'm going to stick around dog breed. You'll see why in a second. I guess it's appropriate with the Westminster Dog Show just happening. And you'll note that I added these initials, and a lot of things you'll see if you've looked at Content Hub, and you can see it over on the left, it's the M dot, and that really came from marketing, so it was marketing Content Hub, and that's what it was originally designated as. And we use this approach, and I've used this approach continually on projects where I use the initials of the company, and you'll see why as I go through this, how this can come in handy. So I'll just add in a friendly label. This is kind of the way you build, the regular labeling, and I'll create this taxonomy. Once this spins up, now I can start to just add in, and I'm going to basically do some real quick ones here. I'll just throw a Labrador Retriever, and you'll see that it's building the technical identifier automatically. I keep this together like this. I can basically nab this and throw it in for the label, put a space in here. We can have synonyms, and we can enter in multiple. So I could say Labrador. I mean, there's already Labrador in the name, but I can add in multiple at once. This is just helps that search engine I can certainly add in descriptions. I can put in a little icon, and there are many, and I could add just a color. That's a visualization piece. But really, this is all I need to do. I could just do the name and the label. I don't even have to do the label, but I think that would be pretty necessary. So let's just let's save this one, and you'll see that appears here. And then I'll add in a Puggle, sometimes Pug, which probably would surface anyway with Puggle, and Poodle, and all the oodles. And just to illustrate, I can further define children underneath these. So I have my Labrador Retriever. I will say Chocolate Lab. And I'll add Yellow Lab. I'll leave it at that. And this is just a real basic taxonomy. And I'll touch on option lists in a second. There's a couple different things you can make here, but just I tend to normally build taxonomies, but there are some benefits to if you're creating shorter lists like this. But I want you to imagine, for the purposes of what we're doing right now and me not having to type all of this out, that this is a really, really long list, an extensive list of all the dog breeds. But just to save time and the fact that I'm doing this live, I'm going to keep it as such. And I have basically 3 parents and, well, 1 parent with a couple children, and then 2 just kind of standalone top level taxonomy items. So with that built, I can go and create the schema for this. And well, before I even do that, I've probably kind of skipped a step here. And when I was talking about where this all shows up, if I pick an asset, you'll see, and just to prove my point here, because I want you to see this actually appear. If I click into an asset and I click onto like an overview panel, and you'll see that I've got a file name, a title, a description, and a type. There's more, there's image analysis. This can be AI based. You can have a section that's connected to the product, the PCM, or content, which is the CMP. So all of this can start to interconnect. But I'm focused on this overview panel, and this overview panel is that piece that I said already exists and why I'm not going to have to build it out on the page. But anyway, my point here is just note that there's no dog breed in here as of yet. So I leave that. I've created the taxonomy, but now I need to set up the schema. Basically, think of this as the way to wire it to what I want this to be able to search on and wire that taxonomy to it. In this case, because it's in the DAM, we're gonna add this to m.asset. So m.asset is just assets in general. So videos, images of all types, et cetera. Just anything that falls under the that category of asset, that entity type of asset. And I'm going to add a new member, and here it says overview. That's that overview pane. So there was file name, title, description, there was the asset type, and the localization of it. I'm just going to add a new member. And so you heard me mention option list briefly before. There is several different things that you can, several different members you can add. One is an option list, and then there's a whole bunch of other fun things, like even just like a switch, almost like a checkbox. Numbers, et cetera, that you can add in that are very simple fields. But there's also a taxonomy. I'm going to skip relations in the interest of time, but taxonomy, that's what I'm going to create. And this is where I'm going to start to set up this relation. Think of this as, if you think in your head like a giant spreadsheet, that's a good way to work with kind of a relational database, like just kind of one thing pointing to another in a giant database or a giant spreadsheet. But I'm going to say that this is dog breed, which is the taxonomy that I set up, to asset, so how it's related. And then you'll see right now it says MS is a child of demo.catalog status. That's not what I want. Down here is the associated definition. It says demo catalog status. This is where I can go in. And remember how I started things with my initials and the company name? It makes things a lot easier to surface up quickly. So that's one of the ways you'll see this. And if I get to a certain point, I'll show you another place that will show up. But it's a nice way to just have a quick way to surface up anything you've added custom to the system. And I'll come back to the bottom there. But this case, I will add in dog breed, just the clean label, any help text that I might want to add in, and then I'm just going to say this is breeds. That's kind of just the association label. And then because I'm going to allow you to add one type, one dog breed to an image of a dog, I'm going to say one to many. Now, I might choose to do many to many because I may have multiple breeds in an image. So that's certainly an option. One to one is literally, one type to one image, so it's kind of limiting. So one to many is where I'm going to approach this and say save. Then I apply my changes. And because I already have this built into the overview pane, you'll now see that if I go to my assets, I can then basically apply that. So here, you won't see it right away, but if I click on the pen tool, here's my dog breed, and I can go in and pick that. You'll see that I have the children available. Sometimes it takes a second once I just built it. Come on. I'll fight it. Here we go. But then this is where I can go in and say, create new images, and start to add images. Now, that was me just because I want to show you some options on importing. This is me just kind of setting the groundwork and helping you understand like why there's different ways to do this. So we had basically a taxonomy, and again, remember how I said there could be a bunch of things, and we've had taxonomy where there were 3,000 rows in the spreadsheet. So I wouldn't want to enter those all in manually with parents and children, etc. There are also the idea of images, and I want to show you some import options there as well. And I'm going to start with one import option here. And let me just touch on, let's go kind of tap on the slide real quick here and just say that this is what I'm going to look at. I'm going to show you importing assets from a manual, just conceptually on that, or the Excel process. And I'm going to show you that not just for importing assets, but also importing taxonomy as well. So let's just go here and let's just manually add some assets. Okay, so I'll just say upload files. By the way, this is really cool if you have like a bunch of assets like anywhere accessible as a public link already. You can just add all those links and it imports it. So this was very fun. Use that on a project, but upload itself has the ability to select files or just simply drag and drop files right from your desktop. If I can, here we go. Drag those on. And we're going to add in some adorable puppy photos because why not? So this is already started processing. If you're ever wondering what's going on, you can go up and you can check on your background processes and see what's chugging away in the background. So those are all processing, and I can go to my create panel. This is where I uploaded them. And normally, depending on workflow, I can create and then approve and move or kind of select those to upload. They'll go to the review panel, and this is where I could have somebody else, in a workflow approve and maybe enrich the metadata. And ultimately, once they send them forward, they'll end up in assets. So that's kind of the 3 steps. However, you can all publish, and I'll show you here. But I'm going to refresh these. We should start seeing some previews shortly. It just depends on what's all going on in the background, which actually leads me to one more thought here. If you're ever wondering what's kind of going on in the background as an admin, there is this stats app, which is really helpful to see what's kind of at the current activity. Looking through here, you can see, anything that's just coming in or work in progress. A lot of times you'll see down here in the processing, this is pushing through, and you'll see the numbers kind of coming in and what's going through. You can also see if the processing agents are running. So here we have one that's actually running. Right now it says no activity, so probably getting to the point where these things are going to be ready. But this agent is running, and it is creating one other thing I will show you and wanted to touch on while we wait for those assets is the renditions and that's this media processor here. A few things that I've learned along the way. First of all, you'll see here that, you know, it's by file type. You can add an entire new set that'll work alongside. So I can make, and like say you had a whole set of social media sizes and dimensions that you wanted to create, you could create one that's just called social media and almost basically leave this content set alone, leave it be just the out of the box version and not touch it, because it'll work next to another set that has the same file type. So it doesn't have to be just one. And another thing I'll point out is if you click on any of the gears, and I'll pick on video on this one, let's say you had a lot of video, there is a priority setting. So right now this is set to low, but you can set this to a high, you know, element and just let it kind of process, you know, some of these file types faster. But then ultimately, once you start to look at these, this is the engine, this is what's rendering, what those agents are running in the background. It's kind of building out everything from when it comes in. It's going to extract that system metadata. It's going to convert to PDF, convert to a preview, convert to a website image. Now the original is always going to be in there, so you can always rerun renditions off of that asset. But just keep in mind, if you're ever building these, you definitely don't want to have them kind of, you don't want it flat when you're thinking sizes, because you want it to downsize. So like if I go from original size down to preview, anything that's smaller than preview, I'm going to build off preview, because then it doesn't have to, it just works just a little bit faster. So you kind of keep going to the right as you size down. So that's what you're seeing here. And basically it's going to create different, you know, within reason, especially off that original size. But that's just, you know, there's some speed that can be gained there. So there's a whole lot of stuff once you start getting into more of this, that if you're working with your developers and such, to be able to further refine all these rendition links and the information in here. But there's all sorts of details that, in the interest of a little time here, I'm going to keep it short here. But that's kind of that rendition piece. But let's go back. We should have our assets now. There they are. Aren't they adorable? There we go. So I can click on the image. Now my image came in, and I can go in and I can basically say breed of dog, and I don't know, is this a chocolate lab? I'll say yes. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And here's all those renditions. So right now it's just 2 pages of, I've been in projects that have 6, 8, 10 pages of renditions. And this is just where, you know, individuals can download different sizes or create their own, et cetera. But the system data came in, and I can further supply, you know, add that chocolate lab piece to this, save it, and I can even direct publish this, and we'll push it through to assets. And then we'll see how long that takes to get over here. Let's just see. Not yet. So it's processing that, and it should ultimately bring this over here. And I don't know if I can try lab. One more second. I'll try this one more time, and if I don't see it, we'll move on. But it is chalk, unless I spelled something wrong. Anyway, the process is, it's probably chugging away in the background, and it's going to work it over to assets. But that's kind of like the whole import and putting taxonomy and all this together. But let's kind of touch quickly here on the approach on some of this. So first of all, mass edit table. So what I just did with importing, I still have to apply that metadata, and the idea of applying metadata to every single one of these individually is mind-numbing, and that's just 6. Imagine tons. If I select all of them, I can go to this mass edit table and basically go in and and then be able to double click and add in and then drag. So if I say type and I say this is a product asset, I know it's not, but you'll see that this works just like a spreadsheet, and I can drag, and that's tagged now across the board. So that's a fast way of kind of doing manual. If you've got somebody that's got to kind of detailed parse through, that's one way of handling it. So that's what you're seeing here, is this mass edit table. So think about that as this one first process: manual upload, mass edit table. Bring in images, go into the mass edit table. The taxonomy that you tell is available in the mass edit table will be there to set up and add. The other one is this Excel import sheet, and this is kind of the meat of what I wanted to talk about here. And I know that this slide and the next are a bit of an eye chart, but just wanted to touch on some things that when you're thinking about importing, taxonomies, you need to set them up for anything asset related on M asset. That's what you saw me when I went to schema, that needs to be set up on M asset. So that's why you see that tab that says M asset. And then there's an import Excel functionality that needs to be enabled on a create page. And again, this is kind of a lot of details in a short time, but I will tell you that a lot of this is going to be pushed out by me on blog and YouTube over time here as well. But just be aware that, this might be a screenshot and the next one might be a screenshot for you to take. But, the Excel tab name matters. You want that m.asset to match the one that's basically what you're tying that asset to. I've taken to color coding fields that you want. So say you have a customer or you are the customer, basically you don't want one's fields to be required. I've taken to coloring them red. That way they know that there has to be something in that field or it will fail on upload. So that will just on that line will fail. So I make sure that, basically their job isn't done until I have that all filled out. And then taxonomy names, they definitely matter. You see that there's like the proficient.entity market.milwaukee. Like the names of the files have to be somewhat of the technical name to properly adhere to the title, that schema item. So, in this case, if it were the dog breeds, it would be rb.dogbreeds, and then .chocolate lab, and that would go up to that dog breeds category. You can multi-select taxonomy, and you can separate that by pipe. And what I mean by that is, how there's somewhere I could have many to many. I might have the option where you can apply multiple dog breeds, for example, to an image. You can do that when you do an upload, and you just put a pipe in between the different technical names, and it'll add those to it automatically. So you can upload the file and the taxonomy at the same time. So if you have access to the public information, and this is the preferred way of doing this, you can tie the image right there and put all the taxonomy with it. When you're done importing this Excel sheet, you have a fully loaded assets and taxonomy built out dam. We've done this with 2,000, 3,000 at once, and it's nice and quick. The piece over here is just a couple screenshots. I realize this is, unless you've been in the weeds, you have to go into the page section of admin and go to the proper page and turn on import Excel, and then you get this import Excel option where I created images. But that's just to show you that import option. Some things learned there. The next one is importing taxonomy via Excel. So you saw me in the very beginning manually building taxonomy. Well, again, we've worked with some customers where we've had 3,000, 4,000, 6,000 lines of taxonomy. You think locations, for example. Entering all of that the way I entered a few lines manually would take days and several people. You can, if they have a spreadsheet, now, if they don't have a spreadsheet, they're still going to have to enter it into a spreadsheet. But, the idea is basically getting a spreadsheet out and saying, here's my identifier, and here's my name, and all the pieces that make up that taxonomy. So I have my dog breed, and then all the sub breeds, etc. And you can have columns for them that are parent, child, 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 or parent, child, grandchild, etc. And you can have those columns. But the key is ultimately when you're ready to import this, and if you're somebody that's having to then ultimately be the person importing taxonomy, you need to flatten the list, so to speak, where everything in this column A has to be the identifier. And my point here is this: color code the children column, color code the grandchildren column, and then you're going to go through and you're going to flatten. So if you're looking for a pattern here, you'll see there's this category .dxp. Then there's this category to self, to the parent. And so these three items are children of this. So these three items are flat in column A, but I'm saying that this is the parent here. These two are grandchildren of this, and that's identified here. So I'm basically taking what may have been a multi-column list saying here's a parent, here's a child, here's a grandchild, etc. of taxonomy, and you flatten it over. But by doing this, and you do have to do it in the right order, you can't put a child before a parent because it won't know what to reference. But if you do this in the right order, and I've had really great success with this, like kind of those awe-inspiring successes when you're so happy that it works right out of the gate. But when you do the spreadsheet right, you load it in and your taxonomy is just done. And there's something very nice about working with it visually in Excel, because then you know it's done right, the order's right, and then once it imports it, it's just in there, and the list is decidedly shorter looking once you get in taxonomy in the taxonomy because of all the parent-child relationships. But this is a really quick way of doing all this, and you basically just build a tab for each taxonomy item. And so you can have many different taxonomy definitions with all of the actual content for it, all of the actual taxonomy names for each type of taxonomy, and ingest it all at once, and it puts them all into place. So that's one really cool piece. And again, this is probably more of a screenshot than anything, but you can do this with option lists. The one thing I wanted to mention that I should have before was option lists are lightweight compared to taxonomy. So this is something where, that's the advantage. The disadvantage is you can't use it to drive security for your users, but this is a great way of doing this. So I'll leave that at that. I realize I'm running out of time, so I'll pause for questions here because there's probably a few.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came in, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was me just giggling.
Okay.
I realize that that's just a lot all at once, but go ahead.
No, that's okay. First of all, one of our attendees says, thank you for the puppies, and I second that notion. The question says, does this work the same for content that can be connected to Sitecore XP? And if it is done, can the metadata complete fields in XP that can then be used for profiling in 10.1 with marketing definition mapping?
So yeah, I mean, this is more of just the connector piece, but I would say largely the answer to that is yes. I mean, and this even comes down to kind of the future and the roles that we're talking about here, because ultimately this is just assets, and whether they're in XP or whether they're in any other channel, it's just assets. And so the process that I just talked through is still just loading in these assets and applying taxonomy. From the Sitecore perspective, all of these things have hooks to them. So let's leave this and just kind of pick on this, and I'll kind of keep this quick if I can. I'll just open up one of these. But all of these fields, if you saw when I was in creating them, have a technical identifier. So dog breed was rb.dogbreed, and there was all the different ones. But those are basically hooks that Sitecore can tap into for your developers to basically work them and tie them into fields. So how they get used and where they get pulled into and where they become available in Sitecore is just a development process. And so yes, I would say it does work with 10.1 profiling, but that's going to have to be a setup, a configuration.
Sure, makes sense. Awesome. So those were the questions, or that was the question that came in through the chat. Yep. If you're good, Rick, I don't know if there's anything that you want to cover off. I know you paused for questions, but if there's anything you want to say to close out.
I'll just throw this up just because it's not so much a shameless plug, but more of a resource. The YouTube channel I am building out. So if you are looking for more of like what is the DAM, what is CMP, what is MRM, what are all these pieces, I am continuing to build those out. I will also give Sitecore props on the documentation. It is decent documentation and keeps getting better. So there is a lot to be found there. So just some social and some more information about that. So, but thank you again for having me. I know that's a lot of information in a short amount of time.
That was great, Rick. Thank you so much for sharing, and appreciate the resources as well. Walt's going to be talking about synchronizing sales pipelines in Sitecore and Salesforce for B2B services businesses.
Okay, yeah, so connecting Sitecore and Salesforce in terms of the sales pipeline, and we'll do this in the context, again, of a kind of a B2B service business, just to give it a little bit of a vertical example. So I think this is a pretty cool idea because I've discussed this with several marketers, and they always show interest in this type of thing, but not a lot of folks are doing it. So it's just kind of food for thought, and maybe something you can bring into the fold here. So the agenda for the talk today is to talk about some functional definitions, just to get on the same page with the words that I'm using and why I picked certain things for the demo. Then we'll set up the Sitecore side on the configuration, and then we're going to use the Lighthouse demo as a tool for this. Then we'll do a quick demonstration from the visitor side so we can capture some data, and then we'll look at the data that was captured in both systems, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. Let me try to get to the next slide. Okay, so on to the definitions. So here's a couple scenarios, just drilling down a little further. Let's say the user is a consulting firm that's doing some merger and acquisition project with a VC, or maybe it's a law firm that's working on a defense lawsuit, or an association that's providing training services. You know, any of these things can be a B2B type service. So it's a pretty wide range where you could leverage this if you're working with different types of organizations. There's typically a lead, opportunity, and contract type objects, and there can even be more in there. And then there's various status in each of these, depending on the implementation of the CRM and the business rules. This can change. But we're going to focus kind of on a couple different statuses within opportunities. So we're not going to try to boil the ocean here. And really, we want to get some ideas for personalization based on where the visitor is in their journey, or particularly the opportunities journey. So let's take a look at some of the taxonomy on the Sitecore side. So if you worked with outcomes before, there's a lead management funnel outcome group that has all these different statuses. And for the demonstration today, we'll focus on lead and opportunity, but there's even more there. There's a quick link to the documentation. So let's compare on the Salesforce side. So here's a picture of an opportunity. And again, there can be other things in the mix like lead, quote, contract. Those are other objects. And then there can be various status, like I mentioned, within each of those. And there's a good little document there on it on their website. But you can see for this particular opportunity, it's fairly straightforward. It's got 4 stages, which is also a status, where you're prospecting, getting more information, you're qualifying, you're proposing a solution, and then you either win or lose. So that's just, again, to get us on the same page with the process. So now let's marry the process with what might happen in these different systems. So the example today is going to be a workshop type of sales motion. So someone comes to the website, they see content on a service, we're building some thought leadership there, we're suggesting a workshop, they're filling out a form, and then we start talking with them, and so on and so forth. So at the request, we would want Sitecore to add a sales lead outcome, and then use the integration between Sitecore and Salesforce to add a contact, and then also build out an opportunity so the team can start working and collaborating on that. Then as it's qualified, you could update Salesforce to the next stage, but then on the Sitecore side, add an opportunity outcome. And I'll talk a little bit why those 2 differences are there when I show you some of the screenshots. And then eventually the deal's won or lost. In this case, if it was won, you could also add the closed won outcome, which you saw was also out of the box. So we're going to kind of focus on the first 2 in the visitor's experience. All right, so let's do the setup on the Sitecore side. So just to give us a little more data, I also did a goal here. Again, this is the Lighthouse demo, using this as a tool. I think this is a cool kind of tool in our tool belt as strategists, because you can create like the actual final result and kind of whiteboard it a little bit in the context of a system without just writing words on the paper. So even though this isn't their actual implementation, it might be a good way to create some ideas and get some mock-ups out the door quickly. So I just copied one of the existing goals and gave it some points here. And then also went down to the outcomes and check this monetary value applicable box, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that's important in a moment. And then went to the form and just repurposed an existing form by copying it, and then use Sitecore forms to associate that to the sales lead outcome, which you can see is out of the box there on the bottom right. So a lot of this is out of the box, which is great. I'll point out a couple of things that are not. And then I go to the page where you kind of start at the end here, at least how I'm setting it up, where I'm starting at the form and I'm working my way back to the entry point to the form. So I'm associating the goal. And the reason I want to do this is not everybody is going to sign up for the offer. So I might want to do some reporting on who viewed the offer but didn't go forward. And then I'm changing the data source here for the form that I copied to make sure that's all wired up properly. And then finally, I go back to at least Lighthouse ships with like this basic page about trade finance, but it doesn't do anything. So what I have to add here is a link to point you back to the form. And that kind of closes out the simple visitor journey that we have here. So that's what you'll see next. So visitor lands on the page, get interested in finance, trade finance specifically. They see some great thought leadership that we have, recognize that, hey, let's have a workshop with the subject matter experts here. You can see the view offer goal is on there, and then they submit the form, and now the outcome is registered here, the sales lead. Okay, so now we've got our talons in somebody who's interested. So let's go now onto the kind of the reporting side of things, looking at the aggregate analytics, if you will. The outcomes report, you can see the lead management funnel group, which again was out of the box there. You saw in the beginning that I pulled from Sitecore's documentation. And then you can drill in and see the various other outcome items in there, which right now we just have sales lead because that's all I generated. But in a moment, we'll have even more type of activity in there. Now over to the individual's profile and on their timeline and all that, you can see the outcome here as well. I wanted to point out the monetary value is set to 0. I believe there's a bug there in the Lighthouse code where it was hard coding it to 0. So again, I'm not trying to solve all the coding issues right now, just pointing out where we want to capture data. And I'll pose this question at the end of the presentation, but having some of these dollars in Sitecore is a really cool way to get the attention of the sponsors when we talk about return on investment for why we're making changes to the system, and see kind of the impact being captured there as it relates to engagement. Okay, so the other cool thing about Lighthouse is it ships with the Sitecore to Salesforce integration. So really I'm just using this item here to kick that off so that contact can go over there and we can complete this process. So there's the person that submitted the form. And there's some data enrichment here, so the engagement value, and there's other fields that are brought over, and obviously you can extend that. So that's nice because sales typically isn't in Sitecore or looking at those reports, so they can get a little more information about what have they been doing on the site. Maybe they could use that to their advantage. Okay, so now someone on the sales side would typically be tracking this over here in Salesforce, and you can see some of these different data points here that needed to get updated, like what's the typical amount of a deal that comes in through a workshop, and the business would typically know what this is, and it applies a probability here, so you get some expected revenue that changes over time as the opportunity advances, and it's also associated to the contact that had the interest. And then what this person is going to do is advance to the next stage. So now it's in the qualifying, and you can see the expected revenues increasing. Also, the product was added, which is an inception service here, or advisory planning, that type of thing. So work is being done. The point is the work is being done here on the Salesforce side once that came in through Sitecore. And that's where, for folks that are setting up these integrations, if they even have done that, it's a lot of time where they stop. But let's go for the round trip here. So let's say I come back into Sitecore. This piece isn't out of the box, but obviously with some code, this could be created based on that activity in the Salesforce side, and create an opportunity outcome now within that particular contact. So again, what I want to point out is the kind of data model difference between the two. Salesforce is kind of more like the system of record and the latest version of what's going on, whereas Sitecore is tracking these different interactions as you go. It's kind of additive, and that's because both systems are meant to do different things. So I can see the progression here of the prospect, if you will. So let's take a look at pipeline reporting. Again, on the Salesforce side, it's pretty straightforward. It's ordered by stage, where the winning would be at the bottom. So you can get a good list of kind of everything here, and you can see all of my roadmap deals that are coming in, because my business rule said anybody who's interested in a workshop, let's go ahead and create an opportunity of roadmap, because that's our typical motion and what we expect to happen. And then, so let's just compare again on the Sitecore side, drilling back into lead management funnel. You can see the opportunity here now, along with the sales leads. And it's not quite as decorated as the Salesforce side, a little different data points, and it's not ordered quite the same. So again, this may be an opportunity to extend this dashboard. Okay, so that was a look at all of the setup, the integration, what the different reports look like. So let's talk about other kind of food for thought here. On the Sitecore side, when dealing with outcomes, consider handling monetary value and be on the lookout for that. The dashboard, again, you may want to extend to look a little more like some of these other reports, because the data points were a little thin there, in my opinion. And then maybe personalizing based on opportunity stage. So what you say to somebody who's at the end of their decision-making process, you may say something different than at the beginning of it. On the Salesforce side, the integration, Sitecore to Salesforce doesn't do everything. And if you want to carry additional logic forward, you might consider using the Salesforce workflow, because it could trigger off of that status and go do a bunch of extra work, like the account and product matching. Salesforce is very relational, so you have to, once you have the opportunity, you have to associate it to all these other little things and make sure that's all good to go based on the implementation's business rules. And then giving sales better information by enriching the contact profile is another opportunity as you connect these systems. So the final question I'll leave everybody with is, how can we use the opportunity revenue and the engagement that we're getting on the Sitecore side to build a case for return on investment? For instance, increasing attraction there, increasing engagement, pushing the opportunities further to the right of the funnel might be a good way to get budget for your next project. Okay, that's all I have for today.
Awesome. That was a great presentation, Walt. Thank you for sharing. I think really great use cases as well in terms of that integration between Salesforce and Sitecore, being able to have that lead management and really being able to connect into both the experience profile, of course, but the experience analytics as well, and having that visibility in both systems. So super helpful, very appreciative. I'm just going to close this out and thank everyone for joining us today. I know we only had 2 presenters, but I think it was a lot of great information. And just keep an eye out. Our next SMAC webinar number 7, is going to be on Tuesday, September 7th at 7 a.m. UTC. So keep an eye out for that agenda. That will be coming out ASAP. So we'll get that over to you guys. And as always, please feel free to reach out to the SMAC team via email, LinkedIn, Slack. If you have any topics that you want to present at a future webinar or anything for inclusion in the newsletter. So thank you again for joining, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thank you.